You were just babies then. What? You were babies in the war. Like the ones upstairs. But you're not gonna write it that way, are you? I don't know. Well, I know. You'll pretend you were men instead of babies, and you'll be played in the movies by Frank Sinatra and John Wayne, or some of those other glamorous, war-loving, dirty old men. And war will look just wonderful, so we'll have a lot more of them. And they'll be fought by babies, like the babies upstairs. Mary, I said, I give you my word of honor. There won't be a part for Frank Sinatra and John Wayne. I'll tell you what, I said. I'll call it the Children's Crusade. What happens, though, when war stops needing children? No more pretense or mythos to inspire babies to pick up arms. Because when God made man, the devil was at his elbow. A creature that can do anything. Make a machine to make the machine. An evil that can run itself 1,000 years, no need to tend it. You believe that? I don't know. Believe that. Hi! Using my face in this one. Gaze upon my heinous visage and weep. If me throwing quotes at you for the first minute and 15 seconds of this video like a performative intellectual didn't turn you away, welcome. I have not read either of those books that I quoted in the beginning, so maybe I am just a performative showboater. I do read, I promise. I'm not entirely spineless. 3 books isn't maybe the most convincing, but whatever, that was really heavy. Just not typically about the nature of war. Regardless, though, of if I'm a performative showboater or not, I'm a performative showboater with some things to say. Some things to say about what I would consider as being my favorite video game for a while. And you know, typically I don't give those labels out. I consider us as creatures very bad at emotional judgments like that. But just Act 3, man. It's been a ride. And I mention Act 3 specifically because I've been playing this game for a long time, since November 2020, after I saw Oyev's video is when I first bought it. And I wouldn't have considered it a favourite of mine, or the favourite, for a while. But violence and fraud have just done so much to bring the story to the emotional forefront of the experience for me. There have been highly emotional moments before this, sure. P1 and Act 2 Interlude jump out to me specifically, but I have not been able to stop thinking about this fucking game since that night in December of 2023 where some Finnish guy threw a brick, book, and a flashbang through my window. Oh my god, that's really heavy. Who knew, right? And let's get all of the ironic shit out of the way first as well. I want to treat this game in an earnest fashion. Video games deserve to be talked about as art, despite what some people do with the medium. I don't even need to show an image here, I'm sure you're thinking of something. I just feel like this community needs less irony. I don't watch much Ultrakill content, but the bits that I do watch are steeped in it. It's like it's afraid to take itself seriously, despite them often being really good videos. And I think this game deserves a heartfelt handling. At least by some people. If everybody was serious all the time, it would be just as, if not worse, Poop Drug Playthrough is a video of integrity, damn it! This community is better off because of it! But as for why I'm here to figure out what about this game makes this give so much of a shit about it. If this whole introduction hasn't tipped you off yet, I am heavily inspired by the likes of DJ Peach Cobbler, who is both better than me at this, and was straight up my secondary source for those 2 books that I use in the intro, a role he will continue to play throughout this video. I did read Geronimo's autobiography at his behest though, he was right, the Ferris wheel scene was very cute, I might have cried a little bit. Go watch Yeehaw Summer! But what's this video actually about? Right, the title's pretty vague, and so far I've barely actually talked about the fucking game. Well, to be honest, I don't really know. I just want to talk about this game that I love very much, and the things in it that I care about. If you want specifics, it'll be a very spiritual and vibes-based look into the story and how it makes me feel. I'm not a lore person, nor will this be a theory video. This is not about Ultrakill as it is, but instead what it is to me. I'll be talking in exact terms throughout this whole video, but try to keep in mind that it's intended to describe the game as it seems to me, and not as it does to everybody else. Hakita could burn this all down, and it wouldn't really matter to this video, because it's about my perspective, and not his intention. At least, not exclusively. I'll be looking into overarching themes of war and violence, explorations of religion, cyclical mistakes, and, at its most specific, the tragedy of the little Christ that you play as, and the world that, should it have had a real one, would have chewed him up and spit him out onto the pile with the rest of them. What is God? Very big question. Thankfully, I don't really have to answer that in a true sense. But why is it a big question, right? Why is that so difficult to answer? Well, it's because God is kind of incomprehensible to us. We're not supposed to understand him, at least in a knowledgeable way, just know him. And that is the contrast between Ultrakill's god and Abrahamic god. I understand Ultrakill's god, because he's human. And I don't think he ever reconciled that with himself. I'll give a quick rundown of the story for those unfamiliar, which I can't imagine there's a lot of you, but it's best to do this anyway. Skip to this timestamp if you don't want to hear it. But the chronology of the game goes like this. God creates the world and is frustrated by his inability to make something that listens to him. And in a moment of frustration and anger, he creates hell to punish humanity for not listening to him. Though he quickly comes to regret this and realizes too that he can't unmake it. At some point down the line, humanity enters what is believed to be their equivalent of World War I. But instead of going as it does in our timeline, it just keeps going, over centuries of fighting. Eventually, they make machines as weapons of war, and they quickly phase out human foot soldiers, leaving humanity to just kind of sit back and pull at the strings of this whole thing. However, these machines run on literal blood, meaning that they never brought about peace, just more and more fighting, because that's all they were made to do. Every effort made to win the war, instead, just prolonged it. It's thought that at some point during all of this, God left, abandoning his creation to go sip martinis on a beach somewhere. That, or he killed himself. We don't know. We don't know when exactly this happened, but it's thought to be sometime during the Great War. Likely seeing his creation tear itself apart got him to finally abandon all hope. The 100 years of arms race finally culminated in these things, the Earth Movers, a weapon kind of in a similar position to nuclear weaponry in our world. Whilst they are a lot more powerful than nukes, able to repeatedly level cities by just hucking their giant lightning javelins around, they are so powerful that once everybody got one, there wasn't really anywhere else left to go. It was just one big stalemate. These things just walking around, hucking lightning on one another, but never able to kill each other, because they had weapons specifically designed for one another, meaning that it was just entirely fucking pointless. By this point though, it didn't matter, because the war machine was in full effect. You either took part, or you died abstaining. The collateral damage that these things caused left the entire planet uninhabitable, forcing people to move onto the backs of them, dependent on the very thing that was killing them. Eventually though, after a while of this, the ash and soot from the fires they caused blot out the sun, causing a nuclear winter equivalent scenario. And because they were so big to rely both on blood and solar power, they all shut down one by one. Now free of the war machine they'd created, and with the only weapons they had left to fight dead, humanity could finally go about establishing an era of peace, which lasted for an unknown amount of time. Eventually though, humanity discovered the entrance to literal hell, and they wanted to, poke their heads in, see what all the fuss was about, right? It did not go well. But not for the reason you might think. See, it wasn't due to negligence or greed, at least beyond the goal to try and handle hell itself. No, they had good technology and came well prepared, mostly using machines to go and do stuff for them rather than getting involved themselves. No, they just weren't accounting for the fact that this thing was alive. Hell is actually a giant superorganism, with a mind only for torture and suffering. As soon as this was discovered, people abandoned the project and tried to move on with their lives. But given the fact that humanity suddenly went extinct sometime after this period, it's pretty safe to assume that Hell had a hand in that, especially with how it had been shown to be able to manipulate technology now. The events of the game take place after this extinction. You are an old war machine known as a V-model. You were initially created as the counter to the Earth Movers, but those things killed themselves before you could be put into mass production, and so you exist as a singular prototype, specifically V1. There's a V2 as well, that was their attempt to not have the time spent on you be wasted by trying to turn your design into some kind of law enforcement bot, but that didn't really go anywhere, so there's just one of each now. With humanity dead, blood is running scarce, and so machines are finding their way into Hell in an effort to find more. And so the game follows you in your descent through the various layers of Hell modeled after Dante's Divine Comedy in search of ever more blood. Got it? Roughly? Good, because I want to talk about this game's alternative take on religion already. Abrahamic God, at least in the New Testament, is defined to me, as a non-Christian, by his love for humanity, and specifically the depth of that love. He isn't just infatuated with us, or thinks we're neat. No, he really loves us, and with that love comes trust and respect. There's that whole question of why God gave us free will if we can then use that free will to do evil, and it's generally taken to be because we need to choose to love God, otherwise it isn't really reciprocal. Love from others is meaningful because they choose to love you. If you're abusive to somebody in order to receive love, then that's not really love. At best, that's incredibly surface level and shallow, and at worst, it's incredibly twisted and warped. But then there's the question of why does God even want love in the first place, right? Well, beyond what I think is a pretty natural desire to have it reciprocated, he is supposed to be all that is good in the world, right? So by loving him, you are loving that which is good in the world, which then fosters a better world. Things would be better if we all just got along, including with him. Good things come from loving God, not because it's some kind of transactional relationship, but because by loving him, you are engaging with and spreading good in the world. The process itself is the reward. Obviously, there's an endless amount of debate to be had about those things, and again, I'm not a Christian. But those are my interpretations of New Testament themes surrounding Abrahamic God that I believe are literarily relevant to Ultrakill. Because Ultrakill's God doesn't respect humanity, and that is his fatal flaw. Ultrakill's God wants control, utter fealty of mankind to him and his law. Now the why of that is pretty interpretive. He could just be some vain and shrewd deity wanting worship for his own ego. But I don't think that's the case. We see him get eaten alive by his guilt. He tried to kill himself over it, and we do not know to what degree he succeeded. Only that he left, whatever that means. If he was sinister from the beginning, why would he care? I think instead, he had an overly narrow idea of what good is, or how to achieve goodness. Whether that goodness was for humanity, or humanity was just part of the process, I don't know. But he didn't trust us to reach that goodness on our own. It had to be his way. That is why free will is a flaw to him. It's getting in the way of what he wants to make, even though what he wants to make may well be wonderful. I really don't know if Ultrakill's God was making the world for us or not. On the one hand, it would make him more in line with his Abrahamic counterpart and put all of the flaw on his methods, but on the other hand, humanity feels utterly defined to him by their role. Those two ideas aren't inherently at odds, but it makes it hard to tell, and I like that about him. If he did want the best for us though, then how tragic is that? Because we did find peace in the end. In the darkest depths of the coldest and bleakest night we managed to find it, but only after he'd given up on us. And given that humanity is such a reflection of God, right down to their behaviors and actions, if we were capable of finding peace, was he? The tragedy is ultimately that he never gave either of us a chance, instead allowing humanity's failures to live up to his unrealistic expectations define us to him, and eventually giving up on us.
And when they came to a place called Golgotha, they gave Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall. But when he had tasted it, he refused to drink. After they had crucified him, they divided his garments by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. Those passing by reviled him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, then come down from the cross." Likewise, the chief priests with scribes and elders mocked him, and said, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. So he is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him." The revolutionaries who were crucified with him also kept abusing him in the same way.
Do you think Ultrakill's God would have done that for us? Regardless, I do believe that he cared for us. You know, in that narrow-minded and selfish way. But his frustrations over our failings to live up to his flawed ideology instead allowed him to define us by those failures, and allowed his subsequent rage to define himself. Oh boy, here we fucking go. I do not like Gnostic demiurge theory. And I say Gnostic specifically because there's nuance there, which, thank you to JuiceCube for that one. Gnosticism is an old branch of Christianity that's kind of retroactively become heretical, that believes the creator of the universe is not God, but actually the demiurge, who fashioned material reality in an effort to impersonate true God. Interpretations on him range a ton, but the predominant one is that he is malicious or otherwise shrewd, and made reality as a trap for us. But the common through line through all of his interpretations is that he is defined by being an imperfect or otherwise flawed god, regardless of whether that's for malicious reasons or not. Now that sounds a lot like Ultrakill's god, and in a lot of ways it is, but I don't like to equate the two with all of the Gnostic baggage attached. I care a lot less about the flaws of an impersonator god than I do the flaws of the real one. The latter has a lot more weight to it for me. An impersonator god is just going to be flawed, that's kind of expected. But the god is supposed to be perfect, and that's what makes his flaws compelling to me. That's what makes it a subversive and alternative take on the Abrahamic god. Things seem a lot smaller if this is to be a Gnostic universe as all. The dying world isn't this failing spark of a fire anymore, it's things returning to the status quo almost. This impersonator universe that never should have existed, finally dying out and things moving on as they should have. Stuff feels like it has less consequence. Obviously in either case there's an immeasurable amount of death and suffering, but I am far more compelled by the universe that is left completely destitute by this, versus the one that just kind of keeps going. Now the demiurge is not inherently Gnostic. Hermetic interpretations instead believe the demiurge to be this hand of God, a manifestation of his will, a distinct entity but still part of him. The demiurge is still true God, but only a component of him. It's kind of like how Jesus is both God and God's son at the same time. At least that's a metaphor I myself use. How literally true that is, I'm not sure. Whilst Hermeticism seems to place a lot less emphasis on the flawed aspects of the demiurge like Gnosticism does, I think there's room for an interpretation of Ultrakill's god through a mix of both, because undoubtedly there is a lot of demiurge symbolism in the game, and he is a deeply flawed creator figure. If you want more information about the Gnostic, demiurge, and more esoteric religious illusions of this game, go watch, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, literally the other Breezy. There's two of us, apparently. I didn't even know about this until halfway through planning this video. The only reason I found out is because people started pinging me with questions regarding his videos, like I made them. He's made some really cool stuff around this exact topic already, and has evidently done a lot more reading into this subject than I have. Whilst, obviously, I don't agree with everything that he has to say. The point of discussion is not to just listen to somebody and believe what they believe. It is instead to listen to the information and interpretations that they have that you don't, to better come to your own conclusions, and his videos have a ton of material to pull from. Evidently, I haven't done nearly as much reading into this subject as he has, and frankly that's because this isn't really a very important part of the video. The Gnosticism stuff, I mean. It's just a take that I wanted to explain, considering I was, talking about the religious parts of this game anyway, and this is a pretty major theory in the community. If you're legitimately interested in the topic, go watch his videos and read up on the stuff yourself. Who knows? By the end of it, you may even be able to have a productive and healthy conversation about it. If the Demiurge is being used as this kind of characterization shorthand for flawed god figure, I like that. I think that maintains the weight of his flaws. I just don't like interpretations of him that paint his flaws as deterministic, or make him and the universe kind of feel smaller, which is what I believe Gnosticism kind of does. I will remind you, I am very vibes-based. This is about my feelings on the game and not what I believe the game is concretely. I am not a theorist. I literally avoid upcoming content for this game. I live in this little bubble, and this whole video is me taking you on a tour of it, because I just have to fucking show somebody. It's driving me crazy. Right, I'm done. No more Demiurge talk. Let's move on to a much lighter topic. Do not believe this! This is hogwash! War is no god of us, at least in a literal sense. It's one that we make ourselves, and thus can dismantle ourselves. The only problem is that we put it behind a bunch of fucking security that requires everybody working together to get past, and look how that's been going. War is not immutable. It is just a lot more likely than idealism. Likely being the core word there. You don't have to be naive to deny war as an inevitability, nor do you have to be defeatist to acknowledge the comparatively unlikely nature of peace. In that case though, what inspires people to go to war in the first place? Inspires in that fire in your chest kind of way anyway. If my neighbours are coming to burn my house down and steal my stuff, there's not really a philosophical debate to be had over my retaliation. Keep your fucking hands off of my plushies. They were coming right for them. I could see it in their eyes. Violence begets violence, right? Both directly and indirectly. That much makes sense. But why did my neighbours have to look so enthusiastic about it? That is the myth of war, and the war hero. They make war appealing, something to praise and honour. Look at these brave heroes going to fight for their country and their fellow man against the savage, heartless barbarians of those guys over there. They eat their food weird. They deserve it, you understand. At that spring, they came upon a young Shoshone boy, not yet attained to years of manhood, shot him through the back, and killed him, taking his scalp from the nape of the neck to the forehead, leaving his entire skull ghastly and white. It was the boy's first battle, and when the skirmishing began in earnest, he asked permissions of his chief to go back to the spring and decorate himself with face paint, which was already plastered over one cheek, and his medicine song was half done when he received the fatal shot. This is why, historically, it is often metaphorical children that go and fight, children who still naively believe in the chivalric stuff about war, that is then beaten out of them by the reality of it. That, or they refuse to believe that they were ever children in the first place. That's okay though, because war doesn't run on disillusioned warriors, it runs on children, who are yet to see war for what it is. At least, for as long as the myth of the warrior is useful, because war doesn't need the myth. The myth is just a tool, one that works quite well, though has definitely historically worked better. Not to get too contemporary, but there's a reason why the mass degree to which the modern world is informed has done so much damage to the myth of the warrior. War still happens though, because war can justify itself. This happened completely and utterly in Ultrakill. Any notions of glory or valor were quickly shot dead and downtrodden into the mud by the guttermen wading through the trenches of dead bodies. But it didn't matter, because war didn't run on glory and valor anymore, it ran on war. Blood being fuel is a very literal representation of this. Violence subsisted off of violence, required it to exist, and thus necessitated violence. Good luck telling a war machine that war is bad. I'm sure it could tell you that itself, but it doesn't care what's good or bad, it cares about seeing another day, and the only tools it was given to do that are violent ones. What place does such a thing have in a peaceful world? Besides, I'm pretty sure that one's like German or something. Machines are themselves representative of mankind's disillusionment with war. Nobody was inspired to pick up arms anymore, both because it wasn't viable at this point, and because nobody wanted to. Having machines fight for you represents fighting for utter necessity. There's no philosophical or ideological linchpin to that, there's no glory to be had. It's pure materialism, but war still happened, because they made something that had no choice but to pick up arms. The Earth Movers are so impactful that they made people move onto their backs because they flattened anywhere else that they could have lived. Imagine that! Your only point of refuge being the very thing that's killing you. It's a very literal representation of the self-destructive nature of violence-reliant violence. Machines are humanity's own little Christs, sent out to die for their sins, and as deliverance to their salvation, but they amount to nothing. There was never any peace for them. They are fundamentally incompatible with it. I want to as well emphasize the role that reason has in cyclical contexts like these. The horror of the machines isn't that people just woke up one day and decided to make blood-fueled murder bots. Anybody could be singularly depraved enough on their own to do that. No, it's the fact that they were a reasonable conclusion given their context that makes them so terrible. Very reasonably, did people take still living prisoners of war and strap them into coffins to use as a living fuel source for their murder machine? That one's not even a secondary source, I just straight up stole that line. Go watch Yeehaw! That is where the greatest horrors in history come from, when they are measured and logical responses to other horrors. If blood was not the best option, why would people have used it? If the best course of action in response to this situation was not these weapons, then why would people have done it? And again, what is the best response to these weapons? If not these, then this. And if you, as a moral individual, refuse to answer these questions, somebody else will. Because there is a demand for it. A demand that creates reward, motivation, and necessity. That is what the war machine is. Do you think Minos knew of the Great War? Like the true nature of it? Obviously he knows what machines are, and that they killed a lot of humanity, but they were made by humans to do that. They didn't have a choice. His whole touting of the temples of man sticks with me, because what does he consider those to be? Obviously we made many beautiful things, but we also fashioned our own destruction. We made the wolf to prey on our own flock. Was he just so furious that he put the blame unfairly on the machines? Or was he so focused on the wolf that he didn't see the lambs eating each other alive? War, however, loosened its grip. The Ouroboros struck an artery and killed itself before it could destroy everything. The Earth movers shut down under the polluted sky of the long night that they had caused, the war machine dying with them. And humanity, who had long not been at the reins of this anyway, could finally escape the cycle of violence that they had created, and established an era of peace for a time. The war god was dead, because it was never real to begin with. Again, violence is not deterministic. It's just peace is idealistic. And I don't think Ultrakill is such a pessimistic game to say otherwise, because what kind of critique would it be then? I know why the sun rises every day. What good does my scathing opinion of it do to change anything about it? You may well ask what men think of stones. No, Ultrakill's critique is more meaningful than that. To me, it's about how by allowing the worst parts of everything to define things, you kill any good that could have come from it before it gets a chance to set things right. Not because there was never any good there, but because it was stamped out before it could do anything. After all, peace only existed for a time. See, it's generally believed that God left sometime during the Great War. It was the point of no return, where he lost all faith in humanity. But it wasn't enough to be abandoned. We could have made it through if we were. We found peace in his absence, after all. No, he didn't have the trust to see us through our darkest moment, and as such, allowed us to be defined by it, rather than redeemed through it. What he left behind was an awful and abhorrent punishment for this version of humanity that he saw, and in so doing, forbid us from ever moving on from that version of ourselves. That punishment exists eternal, regardless of whether we change and grow, and regardless of whether we deserve it or not, and so we will suffer as if we do, forever chained to our failures despite our redemptions, because the system left behind has no room for redemption. That living, breathing punishment, it reinstated war as God, not because it is, but because it was judged to be so by the failures of our creator. People are not born with preformed repertoires of aggressive behavior, they have to learn them. And hell is a cruel and eager teacher. There's a camera by my laptop right now. Camera? Spider. I used my camera to take pictures of the spider. It's very cute and doesn't seem that bothered by me, so I will leave them be. See what their deal is. I don't know. Maybe me screaming at the camera is gonna scare them off. Can you see it? It's like right. I'm sorry that I keep changing outfits, by the way. I just have to film this across multiple days, because it just takes so, like, I run out of storage on my phone, and then I need to move it to my computer, and then I need to re-encode it into, like, an MKV format to edit it, and then, you know, I need to see if I even like what I did. So I just, like, it's going segment by segment. Each day is just, like, a different segment to do. And so I look different every, like, 10 minutes. It's probably gonna be 10 minutes, like, every 10 minutes in the video I'm gonna be changing outfits. Nobody cares but me. Still hasn't moved. We play at a time when the myth of the warrior is revitalized, and war is again something to be praised and worshipped. But it's different this time. It's backwards, top down. See, the myth of the warrior, as we said before, is a tool to draw naive people into war despite the endpoint not reflecting what initially brought them into it. The myth is a journey, decided to be transportation towards a destination. But you don't play as something that needs convincing. The very nature of machines necessitates violence for their own self-preservation. They don't have a choice about it. So there is no need for a transitory myth to bring them to a destination that they are already at. So then what, or more likely who, is the myth for? Since the previous report, more powerful communication equipment has been successfully designed and built, made possible thanks to the generous donations of whom we hold in high regard. With this new equipment, we have managed to re-establish a connection with some of the higher-end machines that were left behind after the Hell exploration and excavation project were abruptly cancelled due to... What we have discovered is truly remarkable, and, if proven true beyond reasonable doubt, revolutionary to the entire robotics community. Boredom. The terminals, unable to move, have grown bored. It is unknown how similar this boredom is to the actual emotion, or what has caused it, but it has led to a symbiotic relationship with other machines. Essentially, the terminals scavenge whatever they can via their teleportation systems, and trade those supplies and resources with the machines that were left behind in Hell, in exchange for entertainment. That is, the machines record their battles for survival in Hell, and the footage is graded based on its entertainment value, and used as points in exchange for goods and services, such as new weaponry. Obviously, there is the multi-dimensional superorganism of infinite malice and cruelty-shaped elephant in the room, that being Hell. Hell is in on this too. Its entire deal is torture for entertainment. God made it entertained by suffering such that it would never want to stop carrying it out. However, I kind of lump the terminals in with Hell. If you don't know what the terminals are, they're the big red elevators that bring you between levels and sell you weapons. They were built as a transportation mechanism for the Hell expeditions before they were abandoned, after humanity realized that Hell was not just a place, but was in fact staring right back at them. And the reason I lump the two together is partly ideological similarity and partly headcanon. See, Hell has been shown to have control over technology, and I imagine these terminals that collect a vast amount of violent footage from machines all over Hell serve as a valuable looking glass for it. Obviously, this is not the only perspective that Hell has. Its gaze is a very esoteric and non-literal one, kind of like omnipotence almost, and it very well could already have the ability to see through the perspectives of machines. There's that eye at the end of the death sequence after all. But I personally see that more as V1 is already recording its perspective and sending it to the terminals, so if Hell is on the other side of that, it makes sense for it to be there. It's like the world's most disturbing wiretap. There's also the idea that Hell is the reason why terminals want entertainment to begin with, like it seeps into them or something. But there's also evidence for blood itself carrying properties of sentience, through some alchemy lore that I'm not well enough acquainted with. And regardless, I still see the terminals as distinct from Hell. Whatever their level of individuality, the terminals kind of serve as an extension of Hell, to me, either literally or ideologically, so they occupy the same space in my brain. They're roommates, at the very least. Point is, they're who the myth is for. It no longer exists at the bottom to draw people to the top, it exists at the top, and is projected onto those at the bottom, by those who find entertainment in the myth. The child's scalped head still lies in the dirt, but he wears no face paint. There is no face paint here anymore, only the violence. You ready to talk about ludonarrative dissonance? I bet that's a term some of you haven't heard of in a long time. If you don't know, ludonarrative dissonance is a term coined back in 2007 by Clinton Hawking, and it describes when the story and gameplay of a game don't line up such that one undermines the other. Imagine if instead, Doom Guy was a youth pastor who was famed in his ability to bring peace to the world with just his words, but the gameplay of the Doom games was still... it'd be pretty jarring. That's a straw man example, but I'm sure you get the point. The term's definitely died down over the years. I don't see it much anymore, but for a while it was this huge buzzword in game criticism. It got thrown around and misappropriated onto a ton of stuff, and in some scenarios just became this shorthand for, this game that I don't like objectively sucks because I used a big word. A very common target of these were shooters, because, at least as far as the argument goes, it's very hard to tell a story that matches up with the gameplay of a shooter that isn't about a mass murderer shooting a bunch of people. There is obviously far more nuance to the genre than that. I don't think I need to tell you that. But I bring this whole point up because I feel like ludonarrative dissonance is a key part of Ultrakill. I feel like it weaponizes it for the sake of its narrative experience. How does it do this? Well, everything that I've described of the universe so far is pretty miserable. A god that abandoned his creation, humanity eating itself alive with war, the extinction of everybody and eternal condemnation of them to hell, and their bastard children fighting over the remains like hyenas. But... why does it look so fucking cool? I'll give you a hint. It's not because anything in universe is inherently cool. Yeah, there's cool elements to things. The baseline concept of a blood-fueled machine is pretty radical. The gun fu is always fun, and music is great, but they exist as parts of a larger whole, and that whole is disgusting, abhorrent, and hopeless. And that's the point. You don't think about the whole. You think about the music. You think about the gun fu. You think about the radical nature of blood-fueled machines. You focus on the myth of the warrior. Hell isn't naive. It fully comprehends the horror of the situation and revels in it. And the terminals, they don't have anything better to do. Us though, the player, we are the only one being fooled by the myth. We are the only one missing the forest for the trees. You're encouraged to play as stylishly as possible, as quickly as possible. You're literally graded on your performance and encouraged to chase perfection. And whilst those things do have in-universe explanations, the effect on the player is still profound to me. Enjoy the high of the slaughter. Treat it like a game. Treat it like an art form. And forget about the forest. Obviously, it's not entirely about that. All of these things are primarily, if not entirely, a result of fun game design. Hakita wants this to be an enjoyable experience first and foremost. I'm not blind to that. But as for my experience, all of these things combine together to make the gameplay a gripping vehicle for the themes of the work. By taking part, I am perpetuating the myth of idealized violence. I'm reveling in it, and I'm refusing to acknowledge the horrible context that it exists within. I'm systematically desensitized to the horrors, and I treat it like entertainment. The only difference between me and these guys is that I am the only child in the room. How about some less meta elements, though? What about the machines? They are the ones participating in the warrior myth, after all. How do they feel about it? I don't think they much care for it. We don't get much of a look into the feelings of the machines in this world, so it's hard to judge how they feel on anything. We get a few glimpses, notably the Gutterman's poem, but everything that you see is largely presented without commentary, because the system doesn't allow for commentary, only violence. This is a place where war was made to be God, so what good does anybody's opinion on it do? You may well ask what men think of stones. That is why machines do not speak, either because it's of no use, or they were not given the ability to in the first place. Because they were not made for their opinions, they were made to fight. The diegetic nature of a lot of this game helps with this as well. Everything you are presented with is presented to you as it is to V1. The HUD elements, the style meter, the hit stop and slowdown, even the graphics are a result of it rendering the world at a lower resolution. That, by the way, really bothers me. I know that it's just a fun way to connect the dots of game design with in-universe lore stuff, but the notion that we're perceiving the world through a filter, a layer of abstraction, what does it really look like? How terrible is it really? All of this serves to keep you immersed in this singular and insular perspective, one that doesn't really give any notes about what you're experiencing. And that left a lot of people happy to just revel in the enjoyment of it. There wasn't really much to combat that perspective for a long time, at least not explicitly. But there was something that changed that for a lot of people. I don't want to die, says the war machine. I didn't ask to be made this way. The machines are helpless. Tools of war made only ever to fight for the cause of dead people. Dead people who didn't even believe in the cause themselves anymore. They still had to, though. It was either that or starve to death. And frankly, how much of a choice did they even have in that? It's described a few times, how machines programming can act as this inexorable instinct. And I can't imagine their designers gave them the option to forfeit fighting for some moral imperative. That's not what they were made for. I don't see V1, or any of the machines really, as enjoying any of this. And I know that seems like a no-duh statement, I mean fucking look at this place. But I really don't see the perspective of them being afraid of all of this very often. Definitely seen it a lot more since Fraud though, and you know, I'll get into why I think that is in a bit. But I really can't see V1 as anything else but this scared woodland animal just looking for food. And again, whilst it's hard to know just how much emotion the machines have, they clearly have a good amount of it, and I can't imagine V1 as anything else but this scared animal. It only came here because it had to eat. It didn't want to just starve to death out there, and maybe it wasn't even allowed to. So it came here in search of the only food that was left. And it was shown the fucking sins of man, the failures of a god, and a multi-dimensional torment nexus of infinite malice and cruelty. It's a bit out of its fucking depth here, no? Just like all machines, really. They were made during humanity's most desperate hour, born of the most disgusting and vile purposes, to have their worst elements utterly define them. Sound familiar? Damned is man for failing to follow my rule, my word, my law. Damned to an eternity of torture and suffering, the wailing and gnashing of teeth. I have created hell, and now I can no longer unmake it. God made hell as a tool of suffering in his own worst moment. leaving humanity in anguish for his failures. And humanity made the machines as the same tool in theirs, leaving them behind to suffer and fight in their stead. The cycle of mistakes loops back on itself, those who were wronged repeating the mistakes of those who wronged them onto others. I think in some ways the machines are what God was looking for. I heard somebody say that a few years ago, I forget who, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. These things that are utterly beholden to this prime directive that they can't ignore, a rule, a law that they must listen to. And in that sense, I think it's quite poetic that humanity were the ones to find that answer, even after he'd completely given up on them. Even more so, that the things he fully denounced humanity over were actually the thing that he may have been after this whole time. Metallic scapegrace, contrivance of war. Beyond the iron veil, Yahweh heeds sterling incandescence within the elk of man's children. Born of purpose, direction, crushed underfoot as the creator, and thus the hand unmakes the hand that makes the hand that unmakes itself. You profane, irreverent, unconsecrated beast of propinquitous hunger, instantiate extant of history, you who thrives on the moment, you are all he could have asked for. It also reflects the ignorance of the angels, given that they are so prejudiced against humanity and the machines. With how much a reflection of him humanity was, and given that machines may well have been his answer, their discriminatory outlook speaks to how little they understand him, and only listen to him, the surface-level caricature of God as he really was. Funnily enough, machines and angels are actually really good reflections of one another, just like humanity and God. They are both children left behind by bygone creators to pick up the pieces, one of faith and one of war. God, though, maintained an ideological integrity to those beneath him. Regardless of how flawed he truly was, none really saw it. Those that do are extraordinary circumstance. It's Gabriel's entire character arc, and Lucifer was cast into hell out of reactive fear for even slightly seeing through the veil, even in a naive way. So the angels at least have that sense of security going for them, that horrible dogmatic version. The machines, though? They were a direct product of disillusionment, embodying the death of a worldview, a reduction to utter materialism, and as such, have no ideological reservations. This idea of machines being God's answer demonstrates both his ignorance and his lack of faith in humanity. But it also has some horrible implications about the world that he might have made, if this is what he wanted humanity to be like. Utterly chained to a core directive, defined by their nature, and completely unable to grow or change. Machines are fundamentally unsustainable. By their nature, they are incapable of securing any long-term goals, instead devouring the only thing that can keep them alive with reckless abandon, insatiable and self-destructive. They are a fire, burning through the world, and as such are destined to die out, just as a forest fire consumes trees faster than they can grow, killing itself to live a moment longer. So how about that world they're burning, huh? How's hell doing with all of this? I think it's dying. And I think it's laughing about it. We know surprisingly little about hell, besides what we see of it in game and why it was made. I like to think, though, that despite being made for a singular and unitary purpose, the suffering of mankind, it's not entirely tunnel-visioned. I like to think that it can see the big picture, and that it knows exactly what it is. Full headcanon here, but I like to think that at least part of the reason why hell continues to do what it does, beyond just the innate enjoyment that it gets out of it, is to be this indictment of God. Its continued existence is preserving and maintaining his greatest mistake, and leaving behind only his failures as his legacy. It has an artistic side as well. Not only are each of the layers these poignant and ironic representations of the sins of each of them, but we get quite a few text passages from it as well, mostly through the form of hell books, though they're heavily implied to not actually be real, and instead just hell, beaming them into our mind. It finds the machines incredibly romantic. It fawns over the Earth Movers as these ultimate culminations of war, these dominating forces that necessitate themselves for no reason at all beyond just mindless violence. It also takes inspiration from them, quite shamelessly even. The Guttermen are such good torture devices with the whole living fuel source thing going on that they paved the way for the mannequins. But the difference between hell and humanity's torture is that humanity's were a result of reasonable responses to unreasonable situations, whereas hell's logic is suffering all the way down. And that love that it has for the machines is the reason why I think the game takes place at all. Hell has full control over itself, shifting, changing, moving around. It's said that it doesn't matter where you go in hell because all roads will lead you deeper. It's a one-way trip because it only wants to bring you further in. And in that sense, if Hell didn't want the machines to make progress, they just wouldn't be able to. They could be walled off from ever entering. They could be trapped in little mazes with no escape. They could just not send anything for them to kill, because we know that the encounters of the game are a result of Hell spawning things in to orchestrate fights. But the machines do make progress, because Hell wants them to. They're too entertaining, they're too tragically romantic for it to let them go to waste. That's where the horror of the game lies to me. These bastard children of Ouroboros-ish hunger, twice removed from any amount of divine intent, seeking refuge in a place where they are completely helpless, and that uses them as tools for entertainment. V1 is nothing special. Sure, we're better than the rest, evidently, but we're only making the progress that we are because Hell itself wants us to. And I'm not trying to say that all of our success is attributed to Hell. That's really boring. It would gladly watch us get turned into a fine red mist by Sisyphus if that's what happened. But that's not what happened. We beat Sisyphus, because we are competent. But what I'm saying is that this is very much a guided tour. Sure, our combat prowess is entirely our own, but the steps that we take are on Hell's accord. And you know, in that sense, it's kind of even more like the Divine Comedy. I'd not really thought of that until now. Just replace... Who the fuck was his guide? Who was Dante with? Was it Virgil? I think he was with Virgil. Oh my god, I'm blanking so fucking hard. Yeah, just replace Virgil with Hell, right? There's the dynamic. Fucking hell. I'm not qualified to make this video, guys. Machine's descent into Hell kind of mirrors humanity being forced to move onto the backs of Earth movers. They have nowhere else to go if they want to survive. It's the only place left with blood left to harvest. The surface world is, presumably, all barren now. So what other choice do they have if they want to survive, but to cast themselves into the pits of this place that tears them apart? Imagine that. Your only point of refuge is the very thing that's killing you. Now, I said that V1 isn't anything special, and I want to clarify that I mean that in a grand scheme, big picture sense. It's not a defining piece of the world or the universe. That doesn't mean that it's not special in other ways. Quantitatively, it's unique. It's the ultimate culmination of the War Machine, and is evidently really good at what it does. But that doesn't make it of universal significance. It's not that V1 is a role that cannot be replaced, it's that V1 is just the one playing that role. If it wasn't, then something else would be. Maybe not to the same efficacy, but that role would be filled. Mind you though, it is a starring role. Whilst we may not be of some cosmic importance, we are very special to Hell. And I think that really begins in earnest in violence. It's been following us the entire time, of course, as it has been with everything. But I can feel it over my shoulder in that layer and onwards. The gaze shifted there. Too closely, it moved. We begin encountering more and more red text from this layer and onwards, which seems to be representative of Hell speaking, and it begins to curate things more deliberately. And I believe at least part of this is because violence is where V1 loses its innocence. You know, the parts of it that it hasn't already lost. Up until this point, we had been living with the consequences of our nature, sure, murdering and harvesting blood in order to survive, but we hadn't really fulfilled the cycle that we were made to be a part of, not legitimized that raison d'etre. We hadn't seen war yet. Violence, yes, and plenty of it, but not war. Not the front lines we were designed to be a part of. To be another installment in that all-consuming arms race, to be a counter to the Earth Movers, and to continue the fighting. That didn't get to happen. The Earth Movers killed themselves with pollution before the V-models could be put into production to do the same, and the war ended rather than being sustained. That changes in violence. There we get to see the war revitalized in earnest, resumed as it was, because it was never about humanity, and so it does just fine without them. And by encountering the Earth Mover, something that Hell ensures happens by constraining it for us, we fulfill that centuries-old plotline that humanity tried so hard to get away from. The story arc of war was carried out once again, as we tear down that hulking monolith, cementing humanity's failures to escape from it, continuing it even in their absence, outlasting them. War no longer needed its ultimate practitioner. It had become a self-sustaining system. I think that's why violence is white. It's stark and pristine to emphasize the permanence of your actions. It's a visual representation of something clean being forever tainted in this bright crimson footprint. Just like by fulfilling our War Machine role, we hit this symbolic point of no return. And in that sense, I consider violence to be the most significant layer, story-wise. Violence is about humanity's final judgment, the one bestowed upon them by God's apathy. creatures defined by selfish and self-destructive aggression, and hell gets to display it like art. It's the ultimate celebration of what humanity is to hell. Brutal purveyors of war and murder, to splay the halls with gore and shout, "This is what you are!" Brings out their worst characteristics and encourages them feverishly. It's a beautiful portrait of our ugliest moment. It's the peak of all of the themes surrounding humanity and violence, which is a huge pillar of the story, and sets into motion the rest of Act 3. It's this strong and bold statement written in black, white, and red. This is where I tell you to go watch the Like Antennas to Heaven animation by Kyle Does Stuff, if you haven't already. It's one of my favourite depictions of this game's violence, not just for its awesome action, but because of where it sits in that uncanny valley of grey morality. Plus he was kind enough to let me use his animation in my video, which you've been seeing extensively. The action is undoubtedly incredibly cool. It's flashy, it's impactful, it's really entertaining, but it's also kind of disturbing. It's so overly vicious, but presented through the cold and uncaring nature of the machines. They're not having fun. They're not entertained like we are. It's like watching animals tear each other apart, and for no goddamn reason. The entire time I'm watching it, I'm being pulled in these two opposite directions of, this is awesome, and this is disturbing. And that's what this whole game is about to me. And it's amazing to see it depicted with so much technical prowess. The animation is ridiculously well done, with a ton of attention to detail, and it's a full 10 minutes long. It's really worth your time. So what's left after this? The story arc has been concluded with the death of the Earth Mover, but there are still more pages to this book. So what else do they have to say? Well, it's about burning it all down. Just like in war, just because your purpose is fulfilled doesn't mean your hunger is any less present. And so you must continue. What else are you going to do? A machine built to end war is always a machine built to continue war, and so the violence persists regardless. Eat yourself alive, and be consumed by your nature. And if violence is all about what humanity is to hell, then fraud is about everything that they are not. By this point, you're a pretty major point of interest to hell. I think that's more than fair to say. And again, that doesn't equate to some grand-scale importance, just within the perspective of its own entertainment, which is not something that you want to be high on the pecking order of. Regrettably though, by this point, we have a starring role, and that scares the shit out of me, because I know what this play is about. It's about vicious, hungry, self-destructive violence, and the all-consuming nature of it. I know how this ends, and it doesn't spare anybody, especially not those pushing the envelope. But hell has some more things to say before all of that happens. Some of its most blatant and hateful commentary can be found in Fraud. So what does that look like? It looks like home. See, God defined us by our failures, which condemned us to be nothing but our failures. His legacy is this punishment for this version of us that he could see no good in, and so regardless of whether we change, whether we grow, and whether we become genuinely good despite our failures, we are forever chained to them, because the only judgment left behind is that of failure. That punishment cannot see good. It cannot see redemption. It cannot see any of this. See, the Fraud layer isn't modelled after the new peace because the peace that mankind found after the Great War was somehow fake or flawed. I believed it was a genuine peace, and one that could have lasted for a really long time. Hey, maybe it could have even lasted forever. Just like how times of war create an environment where the only viable response is war, maybe times of peace could create an environment where the only reasonable response is peaceful. But peace shouldn't be a factor in the human condition. According to God's judgment, we are disgusting and violent creatures, incapable of escaping war. This does not line up with that. God's judgment is now, of course, hell, entirely static and unchanging. This isn't what humanity is, it cries. They are destructive, violent, selfish, and greedy. This isn't any of those things. It's a failure. This isn't what they're supposed to be. The peace itself is the fraud, and the entire layer is dedicated to mocking humanity's attempts to escape from war, to escape from their violent nature. And that is why you're here, in this very specific place. V1 existing in a new peace environment like this becomes this ghost of the past, representative of the war that they tried to escape, tried to bury, back from the dead, to bring it all back to violence. I feel like hell has its hand on my shoulder this entire level, so intently invested in watching me tear through this place because of what it means symbolically. The horrors that mankind tried to bury, this child representative of their violent nature, refusing to die, and coming back to burn it all down. We're like some disciple of violence, being sent forth to destroy the idols of this ideological enemy of hell, to splatter the walls of their temples in gore, the temples dedicated to the false god of peace. And I love this in the song as well. The level takes you through so many different environments. It's trying to be this little diorama of the whole New Peace era, and so the music reflects this. It changes in relation to the different areas, from the office spaces and car parks, to the green pastures and flower fields, to the halls of a shopping mall. They're all really cute depictions of the New Peace, and a window into what life was like during it, something that we hadn't had until now. But it always comes back to that core melody, because regardless, it all burns the same. That is what the core melody represents to me. The theme of this level is that no matter the environment, none of it is exempt from violence. And so, in the same way, no matter how the music changes, the core melody remains the same. It's a common through line through all of it. You find the Reaper in this level as well, which I think is a very deliberate choice. The Reaper to me is this culmination of Hell's outlook on humanity's relationship with peace, which 8.2 feels all about. It's this twisted and grotesque perversion of humanity, which I believe is representative of what Hell sees as their true nature. I say this because of how hardly it contrasts with the environment that you find it in. This awful monster roaming these pristine and idyllic halls. It doesn't fit in at all, which is the point. Because humanity's nature isn't peace. They're not supposed to coexist. Look at how unfitting you are in this place of peace. Awful and full of pain. You never belonged. That is what the Reaper is to me. It's a mockery of the idea that we would ever try to fit ourselves into peace at all. By the end of this, humanity has been symbolically brought back to the violence they were always supposed to be at, and their attempts at peace thoroughly mocked. But you are still hungry. You still need more. And now, it's about letting that loose. 8.3 is all about pushing you to your absolute brink, but not letting you break. You're not supposed to break yet. That happens later. For now, you have to make it through, but you're only allowed to by the skin of your teeth. You have to fight for it now, more than you ever have before. The walls twist and bend, they spin around, rooms layer on top of each other. Recursive geometry has you looping back on yourself. The other levels had nonsensical stuff as well, but this is absurd. It's extreme for the sake of extremity. Contrived set pieces made only for novelty and confusion. What is the point of any of this but to be ridiculous? How well can you play your part, it asks you. How far can we go in this gross display of self-indulgence? The space segment is this taken to its extreme. To be honest, I almost disliked it at first. I was certainly conflicted at the very least. It felt shallow, shock value almost, like jumping the shark. But it wasn't made for me. It doesn't exist for my approval. It was made by Hell for its own vain sense of entertainment. Go faster, further, harder, until it all becomes a blur. Feverish motions running in circles. Kill faster, kill quicker, more, more, more! Even as it all spirals out of control, you have to keep going. Because that's all you're supposed to do. That's all you can do. It's what you were made for. I see to you, son of soul. Eat, eat, yearn for more, over and over, until all that remains is the knowledge that this was all your fault. I'm a little intense about this one, hey? But it's because I love it. 8.3 is such a good example of gameplay embodying literary themes. The level is absurd. The amount of stupid things that it asks you to do, consecutively as well, it leaves you exhausted, fatigued, kind of sick of it to be honest, and that's what it's all about. It's about pushing you to your brink. Not only are you indulging in the violence to a ridiculous degree, but you can almost start to feel it eat you alive, get away from you, like you're in over your own head. Look at how dangerous this all is. Look at the places that your hunger is taking you. It's the best first-person look into the self-destructive violence of the machines so far, coming apart at the seams as they devour everything in front of them, and you can feel that in your own playthrough. I think too that the space segment is a mockery of God in some ways. Space has a lot of relation to heaven in Ultrakill, with how literally the Divine Comedy seems to have been taken. We see Gabriel on the moon, which seemingly is supposed to represent the inconstant, the first sphere of heaven. So Hell having its own miniature version of it feels almost like an impersonation, especially given how it's purely used as a stage for bloodshed. Something so glamorous and beautiful being used for such a shallow purpose. And given the nature of God and the falseness of his ideology, that commentary has some bite to it. It's a worthy thing to mock. Speaking of heaven, I actually feel quite afraid for the angels here. Throughout Fraud, but 8.3 especially with the powers. By this point, Hell's play is fully underway. It's got its characters and its events all mapped out, and they're throwing themselves in front of something that Hell has plans for. And again, that's not to say that Hell is somehow rigging these fights. We beat them by our own merit. But what I am saying is that they're unwittingly conscripting themselves into this performance, one that uses their slaughter as a plot point. The angels are as alone in this world as the machines are, both children in the shadows of bygone fathers. But one of those children were never taught their own vulnerability. Too caught up in their dogma, they weren't told that they were as susceptible to a hungry pair of teeth as anything else in this world, and the other knows that far too well. That naivety paints the tragedy of the angels for me, one born of abandonment. And you know, now that I think about it, they kind of feel like the other child besides the player, right? Back in the Myth of the Warrior kind of way. Also fooled by the supposed glory and valor of fighting, not yet disillusioned by the reality of war. Their faith keeps them naive to their true nature as abandoned and vulnerable creatures just like the rest, and in their act of casting themselves into hell, they are like children marching into the war machine that will, through violence, disillusion and murder them. We see this happen with Gabriel, getting chewed up by that war machine, and spit out, disillusioned. I think that's why I fear for them. I see them throw themselves at us, and it's like watching children go to war. But here, I am the hand of that awful machine. I am the one to disillusion them with ruthless and vicious efficiency, set upon them like a dog. I don't feel like I beat Fraud. I feel like I was let out. That theatre at the end of 8.4 gives me chills, not only because it's the most literal depiction of our relationship with Hell thus far, being one of entertainment, but also because I can feel it smiling at me. The ghostly claps and cheers of an empty room, applauding this scared and hungry animal for playing a role that it didn't ask for so fantastically well. It demonstrates the helpless situation that V1, and by extension all machines, are in. They make it only where Hell wants them to make it, and it will get what it wants out of them one way or the other. I gave it what it wanted, and so I got to walk that path deeper into the Inferno with no resistance at all, ushered like an honoured guest. I think in this whole ordeal with the machines that Hell is dying, more in a metaphorical sense than a literal one. I mean, how do you even go about killing something like this? It's the air, it's the soil, it's multidimensional, it's kind of beyond the concept. That's why I never understand those people that want that final encounter with Hell itself or something. It's so much bigger than anything remotely confrontational. Like, what are you gonna do? Go and, like, throw rocks at the Pyramids of Greed? That's... nah. No, I say dying here more in a sense of dormancy. It's been confirmed that when things die in Hell, they die for real. The human soul gets one chance at an afterlife, and if that's snuffed out, it's gone forever. Hell has a finite supply of souls that it's allowing the machines to burn through, and when they're all gone, it won't have anybody left to torture. It can't feed the machines forever, nor will it be left with anything to use. It will be as if a wildfire came through and burnt it all to ash. And I think it knows this. We've already talked about how hell has an artistic side, and how I believe it knows exactly what it is. It's not letting itself die out of ignorance or naivety. I believe it's purposefully killing itself through allowing the machines to ravage it. But why? Well, my belief is that it's just far too poetic of an ending for it to let anything else happen. The whole nature of violence in this story is about its unsustainable and self-destructive nature. And so what better ending is there for a species that, through those in power, was defined by their violence and their inability to escape from it? Either hell could just let the machines fizzle out and die beyond its walls and just continue torturing humanity for eternity, or it could allow them to be eaten alive by their mistakes, consumed by their weapons. Just as they died in life, they will die again in death, at the hands of their own idols of violence. Equally, it flies in the face of God, his entire creation falling apart in his absence. Not a single bit of it is left. The children of man eating the children of God before finally eating themselves. Have it all burned down. It's like I'm stuck inside this burning building, whilst the walls themselves urge me to pour more fuel onto the fire, such that we both die together. You reached for God, and you fell. None were left to speak your eulogy. No final words, no concluding statement, no point. Perfect closure. I don't want to be the star of the show anymore. I did for a while, but not now. And I don't think V1 ever did. You know, I think about its encounter with the Minotaur a lot. Both these special and unique tools of hell that it has a particular love of the suffering of, as they scramble around its halls in feral animalistic instinct. Except for one of us, the thrashing is all there is. There is no sky outside to chase, only more tunnel to run down. I've had this image in my head of how I hope that this game will end since I very first started playing about 6 years ago. And it's quiet, and not even a whimper. V1 was always going to die. Machines are unsustainable by nature. It's just the question of die now or die later, of which I don't really think that they're programmed to be able to choose. There's not many places that leaves you, besides either dead or dying, in a now barren and empty landscape. And when Violence came out, it gave me a lot of hope for that ending. So much of it talks about how the biggest conflict in human history ended with a pathetic fizzle. I quoted 7.4's book a moment ago for that reason. If hell is indeed allowing itself to die in this dramatic reenactment of humanity's violence, then why shouldn't it allow the ending to be the exact same one than it was last time? 200 years of war for its own sake, ended not with a bang, but utter silence. What is this game about, if not the raging fire burning the world down in the shadow of a turned back, and the empty ashes that it will leave behind? A flawed and selfish god that allowed the worst to define his work and subsequently himself? The cyclical and self-necessitating nature of violence and the context that it exists within? The potential for good that is in everything, but is vulnerable to being stamped out by fear, frustration, and lack of trust, never to be given a chance? And the children that suffer the mistakes of their fathers, only to repeat the suffering onto their own children. I don't know how this game is going to end. I just hope that it's quiet, cold, and lonely. I don't trust anybody who wants people to like them, because who are they without that love? They are their worst. Thank you for watching. Hi, I'm still here. End of the video, like for real this time, but first I just wanted to thank some people who helped with this project, directly or otherwise. So thank you very much to the UltraWiki moderators for creating such a fantastic resource. So many of my assets for this and just all of my stuff in general comes from there. It's a great website. Thanks to the animators, Carl Does Stuff and The Baig for lending their stuff for me to use in this video, that was really appreciated. Cobbler for being the main inspiration behind me making a video of this style in the first place. The various friends of mine that sat through my inane rantings and whip postings on this project. And of course the dev team for making this game that I evidently care a lot about. I fucking loved working on this video. I've never done anything like this before, and I've dedicated the past month to entirely this video. So thank you for watching, whoever you are. I put my heart into this one, which I hope is kind of obvious, so any engagement with it means the world. So please, I want to hear feedback of all kinds. I want to know your thoughts on what I said, on like how I said it, This video isn't about telling you what you're supposed to believe, so give me your own thoughts. This is likely not going to be my style of content going forwards. Things will probably go back to being more stream highlights focused now. I've just wanted to make a video like this for years, so I took my chance. Speaking of, you should stop by my Twitch sometime, hey? I stream like 3 days a week and it's a ton of fun. It'd be great to see some new faces there. With that, I really am done talking at you now. So thank you very much again if you did indeed make it this far. If you did, tell me what your favorite outfit was, I guess. I don't fucking know. Love you all, have a good day or night, and I hope to see you again soon.